Welcome back to the Crochet Crowd. As my friends at yarnspirations.com. I'm your host, Mikey. Today is the Special Olympics Easy Knit Scarf. So as you know, I'm learning how to knit, and I decided to kind of just surf around in yarnspirations.com, and I noticed that her scarf has a little bit of something going on in it. Am I capable of doing it? So I want to start progressing myself a little bit to the easy level from beyond the beginner level. And so I decided, well, I'm going to give it a try. Now this scarf I found kind of difficult to get into my head. I don't know, you can leave me a comment on how you feel about this, but I find sometimes the repeating pattern is so simple and yet I can't get it to stick in my brain. So what I do is I come up with these little check sheets for me to be able to do it, and I would do it anyway so I can keep an eye on the rows. But the actual repeating is only in row number 4. Everything else is just straightforward. And row number 4 was throwing me off over and over and over. So I had to keep retrying. So eventually I finally got it into my head what was going on. And this is the texture that you'll see going on. So it's really neat. It's very flexible. And this pattern has 2 different colors. So you're going to knit until you get 30 inches of one color. Then we're going to change the yarn to a different color and then knit the other 30 inches. So it's 60 inches long and it's approximately 7 inches wide. The color that you see here is called Red Heart with Love, and the color is called Water Lily that I have written down. Right now, I'm just going to be using, I don't know what shade of pink this is, but this is Red Heart with Love, and I'm just going to use a solid color just to make it easier. I'm also going to implement some stitch markers because I found once I got this into my head, I could put those off and just put them aside because I was getting the memory hook into my brain. So my goal today is to show you how to start this. I'm not going to go from a beginner level of showing you how to cast on, but I will use a long tail cast on using 2 needles that are bunched together, and we already have a tutorial available for that. So I'll just do a quick demonstration, but if you want a more slower demonstration, we have that available in our channel if you want. And then I'm going to show you the process to get this thing started, and then I'm going to show you what the repeating of the rows are from 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first time I will go through it, I will mansplain my way through it. So I will explain all the little tips and tricks and stuff, and then I'll film it again, rows number 1 through 4 through the repeat pattern without all the extra fluff. We'll just get right to it. So if you want to replay me over and over, you can play that portion of the tutorial. I'm also going to show you how to change the color in today's pattern. I will also show you how this will end in the bind off in order to bring it to conclusion. So if you want a more narrow scarf or something wider, the stitch multiple is 8 stitches plus 3. So you will keep in stitches of 8, 8, 8, 8, and then add 3 at the end if you'd like to change the size. This is only a cast on of 27. So I'm using a 5.5 millimeter, a US 9, which is prescribed in the pattern itself, with the starting yarn and with a long tail. I don't know how long this is, but you just want to be generous about it. I don't know how the exact distance for you, just be generous. You might have to cut extra off. Create a slip knot and slide that onto the 2 needles, just like that, and pull tight, okay? Make sure you can still slide it easily. And then we're gonna use 2 fingers and do the cast on process. So we use 2 fingers and we split it. Again, we have tutorials available in slower format, and you're going up through the palm, around, and put on. And so now you have 2. Okay, so just one more. So just palm, lift, wrap, and flick. Okay, palm, wrap, lift, and flick. Please do this until you get 27, and then once you get the 27, just pull out 1 needle, so only 1 needle is left inside. I now have 27 done. I do have an extra long tail, so I will just trim that after I pull it out. So just pull out 1 needle, so just kind of holding here and just slide out the 1 needle. And this will have provided extra slack, so it's a lot easier and it will not impact the way that your knitting looks. If you want to trim the long tail, just trim it down to maybe about 8 inches, just long enough so you can get it through a tapestry needle at the end. And so then, therefore, that other stuff is put aside. So let's begin, and we're not part of the repeat pattern yet. We have to do 1 row, and that's where we'll start next. Let's get the yarn into our hands, and I like to wrap my hands like this. And we're going to start with the first row that is not part of the repeat pattern, and we're just going to knit ourselves across. So we're just going to do the knit stitch. So wrap and around, and flick forward and slide. And so then in Okay, on the back side, wrap around and flick. So in, around the back and flick. And once you have the stitch confirmed, like confirmed to be on this needle, you can confirm yourself to slide up. So please knit yourself all the way across. This is like a setup row, and I'll be back in just a moment. So I'm knitting myself all the way across on this setup row. And then when you get to the other side, I am using circular knitting needles because I prefer it, but you can use the straight sticks if you want to as well. Okay, so once you have everything done, you're going to switch your hands, and now we're going to begin the repeat pattern, and I'm going to mansplain my way through it first, and then I'll show you once again without all the explanation. If you want to take a screenshot so you can make your own check sheet, you can. So I have the right side is row number 1 because that's what it states, okay, row number 1 and 3. So it's just a knit stitch all the way across. Row number 3 is also a knit stitch all the way across. Row 2 is a purl stitch all the way across. And then it's number 4 that has the special stuff that you see that's happening here. And so I will explain that as we get there. So what I prefer to do is that once I get through to number 4, I will place my stitch markers in place at that time, and I will demonstrate that if you prefer to use those. But if you can remember, you don't have to use those. So let's begin row number 1. So row number 1 in the repeat pattern, you're just going to do a knit stitch all the way across. So it's just exactly what we did in the setup row. So just do your knit stitch and then meet me back here. So make sure you just change your hands over, and we'll begin row number 2 in a moment. So coming up to the end of row number 1, just knit myself all the way across. And then once you've had that confirmed, turn your needles around, and we're going to begin number 2. And I would suggest checking that off in your check sheet that you've just done row number 1, which I'm going to, because even though I'm experienced a bit, I'm not that confident that I can remember that. So let's check off row number 1 as being done. Row number 2, we're going to start with the purl stitch, and we're going to purl all the way across. So instead of going through the back side here, you are going to go through the top, kind of almost like going in the throat and going in the top. Keep the needle on the front of the project, and you are going to wrap the front needle only and flick backwards, okay, so away from you, and then once it's confirmed, slide up. So go down through the top, stay on the front, and around. I find the purling, as much as it looks inconvenient, is actually pretty easy, and I find the stitches slide off a lot easier than doing the knit stitch. So it's not necessarily a bad stitch, even though some people may consider that. So this is helping us to keep like a stocking knit stitch on the front side, because we just came out of a knit stitch. So this is purling, so it's making the other side look kind of flat, and you'll see that when we get all the way across. So please move all the way across. This is row number 2, and I'll be right back. So continuing to purl right to the very end on row number 2. And when you're done, reset the needles in your hands, change it around, and let's get ready for row number 3. So row number 3 is a knit stitch, so you've already know how to do that. So because you've just now come out of a stocking knit stitch in the row below, this is making a flat section appear on this side. This is the front side of the work, or called the right side, if you're ever curious in the patterns. And so though you can't see it yet because the project is so new, is that it's creating a flat space there. So what I want you to do is knit stitch all the way across for row number 3 and check it off on your list. And we're going to start number 4. And number 4 is the only time that you really have to count and keep track. And I'll be right back. Coming up to the end of number 3, you've knit yourself all the way across. And I'm going to take you to the sample next to show you what row number 4 looks like on the real sample. Because right now you can see now there's a flat spot. And now we're going to turn. I'm just going to put this down and show you the sample. So here in the sample, do you see these raised spots right here? This is row number 4. So what row number 4 is doing is it's having us put stitches together, but it's also having us to do a yarn over, which is creating the textured holes that you see. And so that's what number 4 is doing. It's creating these waves. And it's almost like a fan concept. Let's try it. It's not that hard. It's just a matter of doing it properly. So this is where I'm going to keep my stitch markers nice and close. And I'm going to put them on so I can have an easier time counting. I tried doing it without it. It just wasn't working for me. So kind of like thick head syndrome. So let's begin. And in the pattern, it says that the repeat starts right from the very start of the instruction. So it says to K3, that means it's going to knit 3. And so let's just knit 3. Okay, and so we knit 3. So 1, 2, and 3. It then states to do a yarn over. So how we do a yarn over in this concept is that, see this strand right here? We want to take it through the 2 needles and come around and let it rest. Okay, so it's in the back, let it come and rest. So it's in the back, come through and let rest. That's a yarn over. It now states to put the next 2 knit stitches together as 1 stitch. So instead of just going in 1, you're going to go and collect 2 at the same time. And that's going to make these 2 stitches just become 1. But because you did a yarn over, you're not eliminating technically any stitches. You're just creating a gapping space. So now you're going to knit the 2 together. So see how this one will always stay as a yarn over? And so when you pull through the 2 and keep them together, you can see that there's still 2 stitches here. So it keeps it in balance for the future. Once you have that first 2 together, you're going to knit the next one. Okay. Then you are going to knit the next 2 together. So going inside 2 stitches. Notice that I did not yarn over before I did this. So I'm just going to go around and collect the 2. And now I'm going to yarn over. And I'm going to place a stitch marker right at this moment here. So when we did this whole repeating, we did 3 knit stitches by themselves. We then did a yarn over, and then we knit 2 together. We knit 1 by itself, and then we did knit 2 together, and then we yarned over at the end. And that's the end of the cycle of the repeat. The thing about these stitch markers, sometimes they can change locations because of the stupid yarn over, but you just have to watch out for that because I was experiencing that sometimes. And so let's begin and do another repeat cycle. So we're going to start by knitting the first 3. Make sure that this stitch marker does not change its location at this moment. So just knit the next 3 and make sure that stitch marker stays right there. So we have 1, 2, and 3. And then to start the next 2 togethers, we have to yarn over first, and then we put the next 2 together. We then have to knit the next one by itself, and then we knit the next 2 together. So just think of it as you got 2 together, you've got a knit 1 and a 2 together that kind of all push themselves into the center of like one of those sections that you see. And then after this 2 together is in, before you can start a new cycle, you have to yarn over first and place another stitch marker. And that is another repeat done. Let's do another one. So we're going to knit the first 3, make sure that stitch marker does not change its location. So when you do it, just kind of push it forward so that the yarn goes behind it to keep it in position. So we knit the first 3, so that's 1, 2, and 3. And then what do we do? Before you start the next 2 together, you're going to wrap the yarn first and then put the next 2 together. Then we have to knit the next one, which is by itself. We then knit the next 2 together. And then what do you have to do to finish the cycle? You have to yarn over. Okay, so just keep moving stuff down. So yarn over first, and you can place your final stitch marker there. You should have 3 stitches left, and so the last 3 are going to be a knit 3. So we have 1, 2, and 3. So the reason why I got the stitch markers in place is that if I was losing count or watching TV, I at least know where the stitch markers is so that I can see if there's an error in the number of stitches that you have. You should be able to count a total of 8 loops between each stitch marker because this pattern is in multiples of 8 plus 3. So there's going to be 8, 8, 8, and then 3. This turtle work, and you're going to begin row number 1 all over again. So this is rows number 1 through 4, again, without the serious explanation, just keeping it nice and simple. The only thing I will tell you right now, move your stitch markers as you hit it. So row number 1, if you recall, was a knit stitch, and I'll demonstrate just moving that stitch marker over. So when you hit the stitch marker, just transfer it over with the needle. Remember, the stitch markers are not part of the project. They're just holding on top of the needles. So once you get there, slide it up, and just transfer it over, and you'll always be able to keep an eye on where it is. So row number 1 is a knit stitch all the way across. Just gonna leave a quick tip for you as well. See these ones? That's a yarn over. It looks weird, but just make sure you just treat it as a loop because that's what's bringing you back to create that spacing. Okay, so if you see that, don't panic, it's part of the pattern. So row number 2 is a purl stitch, and again, when you hit those stitch markers, just transfer them over exactly where they are, and do a purl stitch all the way over for number 2 and check it off on your list. Row number 3 is the knit stitch. Again, transfer your stitch marker over. And once you get more comfortable, you may not have to use those, but I found it was quite helpful for me to know. So do that, and I'll be right back and we'll start number 4. So let's begin number 4. The stitch markers should be in place if you transfer them up, and there should be 8 stitches in between each stitch marker that you have. So let's start, and we'll do it nice and slowly together. You're going to knit the first 3. Before you start the 2 together, you're going to wrap the yarn first, and then put the next 2 together as a stitch. So 2 together. You're then going to knit the next one by itself. And you're going to knit the next 2 together. The stitch marker should be right there. So knit the next 2 together. And before you proceed, you have to yarn over once and then transfer that needle or that stitch marker and then start another cycle. So here you go. So you're going to knit the first 3. Make sure the stitch marker does not change its position. Sometimes it can sneak under that yarn over. So just going to knit the first 3. So we have 1, 2, and 3. Before you do the next 2 together, yarn over first, and then put the next 2 together. You'll knit the next one by itself, and then the next 2 are followed by the stitch marker, which tells me that I'm correct, and so you'll put the next 2 together. And before you proceed, make sure you yarn over first, then transfer. Start the next cycle. So you're going to do knit 3, making sure the stitch marker is not going to move. So we have 1, 2, and 3. Then you're going to yarn over and knit the next 2 together. You'll knit the next one by itself. And you'll knit the next 2 together and the stitch markers right after it, so you're almost done the cycle. And before you transfer that over, yarn over first, transfer, and then you're left with 3, and you will knit the final 3. So you can go back using the video chapters in the video description to go back to number 1. I'll say that it's less explanation with it, and then you can replay over and over and over until your heart's content, and you can see that the stitch work is now starting to do its magic. And let's talk about the next part of this pattern. So you're now going to repeat rows number 1 through 4 over and over and over until you approximately get about 30 inches done. Then you want to cut A, join B, and then repeat 1 through 4 until the scarf measures a total of 60 inches. And then we're going to then finish off. And I'm going to explain to you that row number 3 of the pattern is the finishing of the stitch combination at the end. So once you decide that you've gotten almost to 60 inches, you're going to stop at number 3, and then we're going to finish off the final together. So I'm going to show you, now you're just going to go 30 inches, just back and forth until your heart's content, and then I'm going to show you how to change the yarn over when you're ready. So I'm introducing a secondary yarn, and so I'm going to trim this yarn long enough that I can use a tapestry needle to be able to hide that in later. So now when I go to push this onto the needles, I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to wrap it so then the yarn ball here is on the back side of the needle. Okay, so I'm going to wrap. And so what's coming off the front is the tail end. And I'm going to use that to begin to do the knitting. Therefore, the tail end going to the yarn ball is in the correct position for the next stitch. And so I'm now just switching over to the pink. And when I come and do this, I'm going to do the whole cycle of 1 through 4 of using this color, and then I'm going to come back and tighten things up. And if you want to tighten it up as you go, and then I'm going to show you how to secure them. So I'm still going to move my stitch markers as I go, but I'm just using a different color. Okay, so the front end may look a little sloppy until we pull things together, and don't panic. That's just the nature of the beast. So I'm going to do rows number 1 through 4 again using this color, and then I'll show you how to fix those tails. So I'm purling over on row number 2, coming back. So things are a little bit loose here, so just tighten things up just slightly, just to make sure that you can finish that properly as you're going across. And we're going to tighten things up once we secure everything down, so just make sure that everything is in place. And just kind of tighten things up, pulling on the strands, but don't over pull. And then I'm going to move on to row number 3. So you're letting them hold, but you're not letting them be too loose. So I've now just finished number 4 again, so let's turn it around to the good side here. So what I want to do is that I want to secure in those tails that I started off with. And when I pull on the tails, I want to pull it so it looks like it's consistent with each other. And the reason why I waited is that I want to make sure that I can secure at least this color into its own color instead of just putting it into the pink. So we can tell that this is the good side of the work, and the other side of the work is the wrong side. See how it looks more garter stitch like? So let's turn our work over and let's just start securing in the tails. And you want to use a tapestry needle for this. And it's so critical on the first time you pull the first strand is that it looks consistent to the rest of the work. So if you want to pull your needle out a little bit more so it doesn't fall. And so when I go to pull, I want to make it look like it belongs together. Okay. And I only want to stay within the pink color itself and stay on the back side. And it's helpful if you can split some of the plies, not just go into between the stitches. Okay, so when I pull the first time, you want to just be consistent. You're then going to go back. If you want to tie a quick little knot, you can. So just go a little piece and just make it form a little knot, nothing huge. And therefore you can be a little more rest easier a little bit more, and then come back through. And then one more time. And you notice that I did not pop this thing out through the front of the work. So the needle should never come out through the front so that it will not interfere. And once you have that secured in, you can safely cut your yarn. You'll want to do this with any tails, including the very starting tail that you had right here. So then grab the next one, which will be the green. And again, when you pull on that one, you want to stay within the green itself. Okay, so pull and make it look like it belongs. So just don't be scared. So I'm going to come up into the green section. And again, stay within the stitch work on the back. And I'm going to pull through, and the first pull through is the critical one. If you want to tie a quick little knot, you can. It'll make you feel better probably. And then you can just weave in the tail inside the stitches. Again, don't put that needle through the front, or I'll have to come through the screen and knock your lights out. Okay, so stay within the back. Once you're secured, you can trim. And hopefully when we turn this over, we don't ever see where we just did that. Okay, so what I need you to do with this color is that you need to go 30 inches with the secondary color. So your scarf is approximately going to be about 60 inches long. Okay, so then once you have this, you want to go through the cycle. You need to finish on a row 3. So it's the one before row 4. That's kind of so stupid of me to say that, but that's true. So I'm now currently on row number 4. And so I'm going to do cycles 1 through 3 once more time, and then I'll show you how to finish. So just continue to go along and end on a 3rd row. Don't fasten off, and I'll show you how to finish this thing in the end. I've now just finished number 3. So now I'm going to say that I'm ready to fasten off, because once you get to your distance, this is where you're going to be. So you're going to turn your work, and you're going to knit 1 more row as normal. And this time, if you've been following the stitch markers up, when you get to the stitch markers, just slide them off your needles because you're done with those. Okay, so this is the finishing row that we're going to have, and then I'll be right back in a moment. So once you're ready for the final cast off, it's also called the bind off, we're going to start by knitting the first stitch. Okay, and then you're going to knit the next stitch. Then you're going to take the very first stitch and push it over top of this one and right off the needle. And what you need to do in order to do that is, the best way is that you just sink your one needle in, hold down this so it prevents it from sliding off, and take it over the top. So you do the next one, you knit it first, and then you take this one and you go up and over, and you hold down that strand to prevent it from sliding off. It's a little bit fickle at first, but you'll get used to it in time. So knit, and then take the first one up and over. Okay, and as you're moving across, you'll see a nice flat surface up here. So please bind off all the way to the end, and we'll talk when we get there in just a few moments. Leave the last loop on the needle, and that's where I'm going to talk. So you're going to get right to the very last one, and you're going to knit the last one, and then you're going to take this one up and over, and it will leave one last loop on the needle. You're just going to pull this up, and you're going to just trim this long enough that you can use that tapestry needle. And I've already demonstrated on how to weave it back and forth and secure it. But before you do that, you'd have to put this strand through this loop, and that will permanently lock it from unraveling. Okay, and so then you will get your tapestry needle, and you will just weave it in and out a total of 3 times. Favor the back side as you did before, and therefore you would have this really cool looking textured scarf. And this is the Special Olympics Easy Knit Scarf. Have a good one, and we hope to see you again real soon. Bye-bye.